Let's start again. This is August the 9th, 1905. Luisa says, continuing in my usual state, I was feeling a little disturbed, and we know from volumes 1 to 4 that she was told not to allow any disturbance, but there's no guarantee against the vicissitudes of everyday life, is there? And Blessed Jesus on coming told me, my daughter, the soul who is at peace and whose whole being tends completely to me. Now, that's the bit you underline, whose whole being tends completely unto me. That's Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 to 10. This soul drips with drops of light. Now, you know that God is light, the divine will is light, which fall upon my garment and form an ornament. Now, why does it fall on his garment? Is because God is light, and only drops of light can actually touch him. Okay? On the other hand, the soul who is disturbed drips with darkness, which forms the diabolical ornament and most certainly can't touch him. Not only this, but disturbance impedes the course of grace and renders it unable to operate in good. Unfortunately, we all know for our experience that you can get disturbed and you can't even pray afterwards, and sometimes you can't even think, can you? Okay. So, then he added, if the soul becomes disturbed over everything, that means over all the small things of everyday life, it is a sign that she's full of herself. Now, would you underline that in green, white and gold? So if we get disturbed about everything, it means that we are full of ourselves and not full of him. If we're full of him, then there's drops of light coming from us and adorning him. If she becomes disturbed, she is usually the soul. If she becomes disturbed with something that happens to her, but not with something else, it's a sign that she has something of God, but there are many voids to be filled. I think that probably fits us better, that there are bits filled in and there are bits not filled in. That's a bit like saying that you're painting a wall and somebody says, but you forgot that bit. And you thought you were as straight as a die. They say, no, you forgot that bit. If then nothing disturbs her, it is a sign that she's all filled with God. Oh, how much harm disturbance does to the soul, to the point of rejecting God and filling her completely with herself. Now, you need to put a VIP on that, because that is major discernment about whether or not we have truly given ourselves to the Lord. And the thing is, if you find at a particular point that you did let the disturbance in, welcome to the human race, you know what I mean? But if you did find it, what you don't do is get upset and say, there I am, I never get it right. You don't do that. You just go and plunge your nothingness into his allness, okay, and say, Jesus, cover me with your precious blood, and together we can do this. I can't do it by myself. Is that okay? That's very important. So, August the 17th, 1905, all the glory of a soul is to be told that of everything she has, nothing is hers, but all of God. Now, if you get to the stage where everything you have is all of God, you are ready for heaven. Continuing in my usual state, of course, since none of us are on the call, the heavenly home call at this moment, it means none of us are ready. Is that okay? We're all in the same boat. We're still on the train, but the station hasn't been called yet. That's the funny part of this, if you just look at it from the other angle. Sometimes we're only looking at it like, I haven't made it. Your journey isn't finished, that's all. So, continuing my usual state, I saw the Queen Mother, who was saying to our Lord, come into her garden to delight. Now that's Song of Songs 4:16. Okay, Song of Songs 4:16. And it seemed that she was pointing to me. On hearing this, I felt full of blushes, and I said to myself, I've nothing good at all. How can he delight? As I was thinking of this, Blessed Jesus told me, my daughter, why do you blush? All the glory of a soul is to be told that of everything she has, nothing is hers, but all is of God. and I in exchange say to her, everything that is mine is hers. That's your John 14:20-21. So he says, you give all of yourself to me, I give all of myself to you. There's that lovely story of Padre Pio, who was asked, how is it that the Lord works so many miracles through you and not through other people? And he answered, Padre Pio was able to shrug his shoulders like that. And what are you asking? He said, I refuse him nothing and he refuses me nothing. So where's the mystery? Because that's exactly what Jesus is saying here. If you give yourself all to me, I give myself all to you. And while he was saying this, it seemed that my little garden, which he himself had made, because everything comes from him, would unite with his more extensive, which he kept in his heart, and they would become one, and we would delight together. And then she was back in her own self, out of the ecstasy. Okay. So August the 20th, 1905. Grace assumes as many images around the soul, for as many are the divine perfections and virtues. Now, don't forget that grace is an outpouring of God himself. Jesus said, I am grace. And you just need to remember that. Okay. This morning on coming, Blessed Jesus told me, my daughter, if in all of her actions the soul does everything for God and to please God alone, grace enters into the soul from all sides. Now notice that's called placing the intention. The intention is all the important thing. The fact that I lift this container of water off the table is neither here nor there. But if I do it with the intention of glorifying God and loving him alone, then the action is valuable. Is that okay? The intention makes all the difference. And very often we forget to place the intention. Grace enters into that soul from all sides, just as the light of the sun enters from all sides into a house where balconies, doors and windows are open, and one enjoys all the fullness of the light. In the same way, the soul enjoys all the fullness of the divine light. Now, the divine light is the divine will. You need to put that at the side, just DW. And through the response of the soul, this light keeps increasing always until she becomes all light. That means fully spiritualized, as we read earlier today. But if she does otherwise, the light enters through the cracks, and in the soul everything is darkness, because it's like you have put boards up against the window, and so that the light can only come in through the cracks. My daughter, to one who gives me everything, I give everything. There it is underlined for you again. And since the soul is not capable of receiving my being altogether, grace assumes as many images around the soul, for as many are my perfections and virtues. So grace manifests itself in all kinds of ways. So it assumes the image of beauty. That's number one. Okay? And it communicates the light of beauty to the soul. 2, it communicates the image of wisdom, and it communicates the light of wisdom. 3, the image of goodness, and communicates goodness. 4, the image of sanctity. 5, justice. 6, fortitude. 7, power. And 8, purity. All the different ways that the grace of God actually manifests itself in us. And of course, these are all reflections of the divine perfections. And it communicates the light of sanctity, justice, fortitude, power, and purity, and so with all the rest. So the soul is studded, not with one son, but with as many sons, for as many are my perfections. And these images are present around the soul. Only for those who are open and who respond to them, they are all activity and working. For those souls who are not, they are as though asleep, and little can be done in their activity. So we have to be open and let the divine grace actually work its work in us. We have to be willing to receive it, and to be willing to move with it. And if we're lazy and we just don't bother, then it's not going to happen. So August the 22nd, 1905. One who shares with Jesus the weight of his sufferings, that is the work of his redemption, comes to participate in the gain of the work of redemption. As I was in my usual state, my adorable Jesus came for just a little, Luisa said, and he transported me outside of myself. He shared his sufferings with me, and then he told me, my daughter, when two people share together the weight of a work, notice the weight of a work, that means the work of redemption is very difficult, and so it's given as weight, as heavy. Together they share the compensation that they receive from that work, and both of them can do good to whomever they want with that compensation. In other words, what you get from the divine will, you can decide who to give it to. But if you're still at the stage of wanting only to give to one or two people, or you're just your friends or your family, you're not really into divine will. Because God's love is universal, and he loves every human being, past, present, and future, with exactly the same love. And when we start praying the way he prays, we're praying for all souls, past, present, and future. Okay, so if you pray for an individual, you have to put that prayer also onto everybody else who has the same needs. Is that okay? You have to include them all. And since the compensation for our pains is divided between you and me, I can do good to whomever I want, in general and also in a special way. That's the general and the particular. And you too are free to do good to whomever you want, with the compensation that's due to you. This is the gain for one who shares my pains with me, which is conceded only to the state of the victim soul. Now, the victim soul is in a very different position to you and me. We can pray in general for everybody, but the victim soul, because they take on the actual sufferings of Christ for others, and they stand between the sinner and the justice of God, they are allowed a very special participation in this that nobody else has. Okay. And very often Jesus just refers to them as loving souls, as if the rest of us didn't love him. You know what I mean? They're just very special to him. Which is conceded only to the state of the victim soul, and it is a gain for those who are closest to the victim soul, because by being close, they can participate more easily in the goods that this person possesses. Therefore, my daughter, rejoice the more I share my pains with you, because greater will be your share of compensation. And then we read already this morning that if the priest stays close enough to Luisa, he'll get his bit. But if he moves away, he won't. So August the 23rd, 1905. If the soul does everything for God, now it's the everything you underline. We're inclined to do some things. Everything is a very big word. She remains extinguished in the flame of divine love. That means the ego is extinguished, the self is extinguished, and you are taken up into divine love, which of course is the condition of the blessed in heaven. Thinking of oneself is never virtue, it's always vice. So you can see that our society is in real trouble, can't you? Continue in my usual state, Luisa said, my blessed Jesus told me, my daughter, if the soul does everything for me, she imitates those little moths which hang around and around a flame and remain extinguished in that very flame. In the same way, according to whether she offers to me the fragrance of her actions, of her movements and desires, the soul hangs around me, not around my eyes, now around my eyes, then my face or my hands or my heart, according to the different offerings that she makes to me. And so you can see that in the hours of the Passion that Luisa makes sure she touches the whole, I kiss your forehead, your eyes, your ears, your mouth, she doesn't leave anything out, so that she participates in everything. And by her continuous hanging around me, she remains all extinguished in the flame of my love without touching the flames of purgatory. Okay, so you can see that somebody who is really in the divine will is not destined for purgatory at all. Then he disappeared, And as he came back, he added, thinking of oneself is the same as going out of God. Now, that really needs a big, big NB beside it. Thinking of oneself is the same as going out of God and returning to live in oneself. That's why, until we become established in the divine will, we must continuously do acts during the day to make sure we're back in the divine will. Is that okay? That you consciously come back all the time. Moreover, thinking of oneself is never virtue, but always vice, be it even under the aspect of good. Isn't that interesting? Our poor societies, the more I read this, the more I realise our society's in terrible trouble. Okay, so August the 25th, 1905. I want to give you a heading for this. Jesus is our model, nobody else. The poor things who are following the so-called stars or starlets on television are looking to the absolute wrong places to find models. True virtues must have their roots in the heart of Jesus. And they must be developed in the heart of the creature. So I want to give you Ephesians 3, 16 to 21. We have to be rooted in love, grounded in love, grown in love, matured in love. This morning on coming, blessed Jesus told me, my daughter, the soul must reside in my heart, and her very virtues, she must make it in such a way that they have their roots in my heart. Otherwise, they're not in the right soil, are they? And they must be developed in her heart. Otherwise, there might be the natural virtues or those of sympathy, which means feelings. Now, the problem of our society today, and I don't just mean Ireland, I mean, as far as I can see, it's the whole Western world, it's all based on feelings. And if somebody shows emotions, oh, you give this extraordinary reaction to them, even if the emotion is totally inappropriate. So it's all based on feelings. It's not based on facts. Now, a society that makes decisions according to feelings is really going down the drain fast, because feelings, as you know, come and go, and feelings are not all that reliable. So, even if it's those of sympathy, which are called virtues at times and circumstances, and are mutable, that means changeable, while the virtues whose roots are fixed in my heart and are developed in the soul are stable, and they adapt themselves to all times and all circumstances and are the same for all. So notice it's on a completely different platform, totally higher standard. It's not based on feelings, come day, go day. But the others, the ones based on human feelings, are not. And it happens that they feel an unlimited charity or love for somebody. That is, at one time they're all on fire and they make true sacrifices and they would want to lay down their lives, and then someone else comes, perhaps more in need than the first one, and in one moment the scene changes. They become icy. They don't even want to make the sacrifice of listening to even saying a word. They are listless and they send them back embittered or irritated. Very often that's how we treat poor people or people in need. You might be enthusiastic for 5 minutes, and so the first person gets the benefit. Then if there's 2 or 3 of them, they're in trouble. That's because feelings cannot be relied upon. Okay. Is this perhaps the charity whose root is fixed in my heart? Of course it isn't. That charity you will find in John 13:34. John 13:34 and John 15:9. In other words, it's divine love, not just human love. It's not based on feelings, it's based on reality. On the contrary, it is a vicious so-called charity, you'd need to put it into inverted commas, all human and full of sympathy, which seems to flourish at one moment and then it withers and disappears at another. Someone else is obedient, submitted and humble. He makes himself a rag in such a way that the other can do with him what he likes. But with another person, he's disobedient, recalcitrant and proud. Is this the obedience that comes from my heart? I obeyed everyone, he said, even my very executioners. It can't be. Someone else is patient in certain occasions, be they even serious sufferings. He looks like a lamb and does not open his mouth to lament. But when another suffering may be smaller, he loses his temper and gets irritated and he swears. Is this perhaps the patience whose root is fixed in my heart? Of course not. Someone else one day is all fervent. He prays always to the point of transgressing the duties of his state. But another day he has an encounter a little disappointing, so he feels cold. He abandons prayer completely to the point of transgressing the duties of a Christian. So you can see that the thing is far too changeable. It's a bit like the weather. Yeah. So is this perhaps the spirit of prayer as I reach the point of sweating blood, of feeling the agony of death, and yet I never neglected prayer for a single moment? Certainly not. And so with all the other virtues. Only the virtues which are rooted in my heart and grafted in the soul are stable and lasting, and they shine as full light. The others, while they may appear to be virtues, so you need to put those virtues in inverted commas, they are in fact vices. They appear to be light, but they are in fact darkness. So having said this, he disappeared, and Luisa said she continued to desire him to come back, and added, the soul who desires me always fuses herself with me continuously. Please underline that in green, white and gold. I remember having a discussion with a particular group, and they were trying to find out, what do you actually do to try and stay in the divine will. And one of the men there just said, well, I don't know what you do. He said, I just fuse 100 times a day. And I said, 100 out of 100. 100 out of 100. Yes. Because that's the whole thing. You keep on going back and fusing yourself in the divine will. And as you do that, you become more and more stable. It lasts longer. And then you suddenly get onto this high road of stability. So the soul who desires me always fuses herself with me continuously. And I feel myself impregnated or fused by that soul. And I impregnate myself. They're terrible words, aren't they? And I fuse myself. You fuse in me, he's saying, and I fuse in you. You in me and I in you. That's your John 14:20-21. It's just that the translator here is using very big words. So that wherever I turn, I find her with her desires and I touch her continuously. Now, if we're touched by the Lord continuously, that means you are blessed continuously. You are raised to a higher love continuously. You are kept much more stable in the divine will relationship, and so the life really thrives because of the Lord's touch. So August the 28th, 1905, the heart of Jesus binds the human hearts to itself, and they take everything from his heart, even his very life, if they respond to him. This morning, on coming, my adorable Jesus made me see his most lovable heart. Something like many shining threads of gold, of silver, and red-coloured were coming out from within it, and it seemed that they were forming a net which thread after thread bound all human hearts. I remained enchanted in seeing this, and he said to me, my daughter, with these threads, my heart binds to itself all the affections, the desires, the heartbeats, the love, and even the very life of human hearts, which are similar to my own human heart in everything, except mine is different in sanctity. I'm sure he was smiling saying that, wasn't he? We need to put beside that Hebrews 4:15. Hebrews 4:15. And having bound them, as my desires move from heaven, the thread of my desires excites their desires. It's a bit like the Swiss watch. If the central thing goes round, all the other circles go around as well. If I love, the thread of my love excites their love, and the thread of my love gives them life. John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Please turn off all mobile phones. Oh, what harmony between heaven and earth, between my heart and human hearts. But only those who respond to me can perceive this, while those who reject me with the effectiveness of their wills perceive nothing and render vain the operations of my heart. Now, Jesus is saying that when he was on earth in the incarnation, he made connections, what he calls threads here, to all human hearts and all human affections. So that means that you have a line to him that's all yours. And you can use that line if you want to. That's like saying you have a landline at home, and you can use it if you want to. And you can neglect it if you want to as well. Your decision. But the people who use this line to the heart of Jesus continuously are the ones who become aware of it in the end, become so strong. Okay. So, September the 4th, 1905, we changed the topic. In all times that the Lord has had souls, from whom, as much as possible for a creature, he has received the purpose of creation, redemption, and sanctification, and to have received his goods. In other words, if you look at the Bible, no matter what era you're looking at, there were certain people called to a special vocation, and the human race depended on those people to keep it guided towards heaven. Is that all right? I'm just giving it to you in my words. Continue in my usual state, Luisa said. My adorable Jesus made me see his most sacred humanity and all of his wounds, his pains. And from within his wounds, even from the drops of his blood, many branches loaded with fruits and flowers came out. Now, there's a very extraordinary mixture of symbols. Okay. But she's saying all fruitfulness comes from the precious blood of the Lamb. And it seemed that he communicated his sufferings to me as well as all his branches loaded with flowers and fruits, because if she participates in the redemption, she participates in the results. I remained surprised on seeing the goodness of our Lord in sharing all of his goods with me, without excluding me from anything of all that he contained. And blessed Jesus told me, my beloved daughter, do not be surprised at what you see, for you are not alone, nor the only one. In other words, you're not the only person who has been called to a special relationship with God. And not only that, you're not alone on the earth at this moment, because at the same time that the Lord was speaking to Luisa, he was also communicating with another victim soul, Maria Valtorta, and yet another victim soul, who was Padre Pio, and they all lived close to one another, and they all knew each other. Okay, and that's just taking Italy by itself. That's not even counting any other country. Okay. But of course, if you're sitting in a bed all by yourself and you have no communication except with the priest who visits you every day, then you might feel all alone, and you might feel that you're the only one. In fact, at all times, that means in every age. In the Bible, an age is 2,000 years. I have had souls from whom, as much as it is possible for a creature, perfectly in some way, I might receive the purpose of my creation, redemption, and sanctification. And the creature might receive all the goods for which I created, redeemed, and sanctified man. Otherwise, if I did not have even one single creature in each age, my whole work would have been frustrated. I mean, if you take Adam at the very beginning, okay, and if you take Mary and Joseph at the time of the incarnation, there had to be people there who could receive the Lord. Okay, there had to be people who understood. Why do I say Adam? Because Adam, before the fall, had the divine will and all the gifts that go with it. So God was able to go walking with Adam in the cool of the day. That means that there was a divine intimacy there. Okay. And Jesus says in these writings that he couldn't have become incarnate if Blessed Mother wasn't living in the same condition as Adam was in. In other words, God has to have his own environment. So this is the order of my providence, or we would say divine providence, and we'd have to add in human history. It's the order of my justice and of my love, that in each age I must have at least one with whom I might share all goods, and that the creature must give me everything she owes as a creature. Otherwise, why maintain the world? If he doesn't even have one decent friend down here, why would he keep it going? In one moment he said I would shatter it. This is precisely why I choose victim souls. So he has people with this special relationship. Now, the 20th century had many victim souls, as you know. And since the 20th century, Jesus said himself it was the most evil of all centuries. Received 2 major divine chastisements, which is the 2 world wars. And we haven't improved, have we? That's the incredible thing. Since that is so, he called many victim souls to uphold the world during this terrible time. I just hope they're there for the 21st century, otherwise we'll be wiped out. So that's the very reason why I choose victim souls. Just as divine justice found in me everything it should find in all human creatures, and shared with me altogether the goods it would have shared with all creatures, in such a way that my humanity contained everything, so do I find everything in the victim souls. That's why he says there's a special place for them in heaven. And I share all my goods with them. During the time of my passion, I had my dearest mother, who, while I shared all my pains and all my goods with her, she was most attentive as a human creature on gathering within herself everything that other creatures were to do for me. Therefore, in her, I found all my satisfaction and all the gratitude, the thanksgiving, the praise, the reparation, the response that I was to find in everybody else. Then came Magdalene and John, and so on, and all the times of the church. Now notice that Mary of Magdala is put in a very special position. Amazingly, she's put in before John. And John was considered the one who loved Jesus the most. But people do not realize that Mary of Magdala was his most heroic disciple. Much more heroic than the 12 apostles put together. And to understand that, you need to read Maria Valtorta, who was given all of this in detail by the Lord. And Mary of Magdala was the first woman leader in the church. The apostles complained about it, but Jesus said, look, she has the leadership within her. And you know, the amazing thing is that he appointed Peter as the leader, because Peter was the leader before Jesus called him. And he just accepted the leadership. He said, Peter, I accepted you as a leader because you had the leadership in you, and I'm accepting leadership from her because she has it within her. You know. Notice how simple God is, and we make everything terribly complicated. So with these souls, and so that these souls might be more pleasing to me, and I could feel drawn to give them everything. First I anticipate them, and then I ennoble their souls, their bodies, their traits, and even their voices, in such a way that one single word has so much strength, it is so gracious, sweet, penetrating, that it moves my whole being to compassion and tenderness. It changes me, and I say, this is the voice of my beloved. I cannot do without listening to her. It would be as though wanting to deny what she wants to my very self. If I'm not to listen to her, I would take the will to speak away from her. But as for sending her back empty-handed, never. So there is such electricity of union between me and her that the soul herself cannot comprehend everything in this life, though she will comprehend it with clear clarity in the next. If you're going to read this afterwards, and I certainly hope you do, because I do enough text to give you reading for weeks until I come back, I want you to take what I've just read and apply it to Mary of Magdala alone, and you'll get an insight that you need about Mary of Magdala. Then apply it to John by himself, and you won't be surprised with John, because John was up there right from the very beginning. Then apply it to all other victim souls, and then apply it to Luisa, and you'll see the levels at which this text can be seen. And beside the Lord saying there was such electricity between them, I want you to put Isaiah 55:11. So I'll give you one more and then I'll give you a break. September the 6th, 1905. The evil of lack of attention. Okay. This is a very important one, because where we're inclined to fall down is that we forget. Is that right? That's just lack of attention. And if somebody does a work for you, don't you notice if they have failed in the detail? What gets to us is that if a work isn't complete in the detail, isn't that right? Yes. It must be correct in the detail. Well, it's the same with the Lord. And this is us giving attention to him so that he can, in fact, complete the work in us. This morning, after I struggled very much, I saw our Lord crucified. I was kissing the wounds of his hands and repairing and praying that he would sanctify, perfect, purify all human works for the sake of what he suffered, and in his most holy hands, for all that he suffered in his most holy hands. And blessed Jesus told me, my daughter, the works which most exacerbate my hands and which most embitter and enlarge my wounds are the works done without attention. Isn't that absolutely amazing? The works done without attention. Why? Because with your attention and fusing in the divine will, you could make it a divine work. Without that attention, it's nothing. In fact, lack of attention takes the life away from a good work. And things which have no life are always near to rotting. Therefore, they nauseate me, and for the human eye, a good work without attention is a greater scandal than sin itself. Isn't that amazing? In fact, it's known that sin is darkness, and so it's no wonder that darkness gives no life. But the good work, which is supposed to be light, when that gives darkness, it offends the human eye. Now do you see it? That it's no longer able to give light, and therefore it finds an obstacle on the path of good. That's something that really needs to be thought about, because I've heard it said, only in recent years, by the way, they never said it when I was young, that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. That's a very recent thing. No, that's a very recent thing. I've heard it. No. What we were told when we were young is that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing well. But recently people have started saying if something is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. That means no attention, detail not completed, and therefore the chaos that's in the person's life is expressed in the chaos of the person's work. That's what Jesus is talking about. Isn't it sad? Yeah. So take a break for a few minutes.